All right, so we're back. Picking up our conversation about justice with Tim Keller's generous justice. And one thing that really struck me was how Keller points out that we use these words like freedom and equality all the time when we talk about justice.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They're like buzzwords almost.
Right. But he makes this really interesting point that those terms can actually be pretty slippery.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, we throw those words around, but do we even really agree on what they mean?
Exactly. It's like everyone's got their own definition.
And so it's no wonder we end up talking past each other half the time.
Totally. And Keller uses this example of obscenity laws. Like, some people will argue that strict laws restricting what adults can watch or read, they say that violates freedom of speech.
Right. The argument being that what people consume in private doesn't actually harm anyone else. Exactly. But then others will argue that no, what we consume does affect how we interact with others, and that easy access to certain types of content, especially for children, could be harmful to society as a whole.
It's like two totally different views of freedom clashing head on.
Right. And what's so interesting is that both sides are appealing to a sense of fairness. They both think they're in the right, but their definitions of harm, of freedom, and ultimately of justice are coming from completely different places.
So how do we even begin to untangle that? It feels like we're all speaking different languages.
Well, this is where things get really fascinating. Keller argues that, ready for this, our understanding of justice is deeply rooted in our faith assumptions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Whether we acknowledge them or not. This is interesting because in most public discourse, we're not really supposed to bring our religious beliefs into discussions about justice.
Right, because it's seen as divisive.
Exactly. It turns into a debate about whose religion is right, and we lose focus on the actual issue. So we're supposed to stick to these seemingly neutral concepts like freedom and equality.
Right, like those are the acceptable terms.
But Keller actually argues that this is counterproductive because it creates this illusion of neutrality when in reality, our ideas about justice, they're already deeply informed by our beliefs, even if they're not explicitly religious.
So we're all coming to the table with these kind of hidden agendas.
Yeah.
Based on our deepest convictions.
Yeah, pretty much, whether we're aware of it or not. No wonder we end up talking past each other.
So what's the solution? How do we actually have a productive conversation about justice if we can't even agree on the basics?
Well, Keller suggests that a more honest and productive conversation would actually involve acknowledging the role of faith and values up front.
Oh, interesting. So instead of pretending we're all coming from this neutral standpoint, we just admit that our backgrounds and beliefs inevitably shape our understanding of these issues.
Yeah. Exactly. It's about being upfront about where we're coming from. And from that starting point, Keller suggests a two-pronged approach specifically for Christians.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the two-pronged approach?
He calls it humble cooperation and respectful provocation.
Humble cooperation and respectful provocation. Okay, let's break that down. What does he mean by humble cooperation?
So he emphasizes that Christians shouldn't assume they have a monopoly on truth, or that they're the only ones who care about justice.
Right, like there are people of all faiths and no faith who are working for justice and positive change.
Exactly. There's what he calls common grace in every culture, meaning that God has scattered gifts of wisdom, goodness, and justice across all of humanity.
So it's about recognizing that even those who don't share our faith can and do contribute to the pursuit of justice.
Absolutely. It's about collaborating with others who share similar goals, even if they come from different backgrounds or have different ideas about how to get there.
Okay, I like that. And what about this respectful provocation? That sounds a little more confrontational.
It is, but in a good way. Keller's arguing that while Christians should humbly cooperate with others, they should also be willing to challenge the limitations of purely secular approaches to justice.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Like working together, but also being willing to push back and raise questions that might not otherwise be considered.
Exactly. Like, he gives the example of when secular views might focus too narrowly on individual rights or maximizing happiness.
Okay, I see that.
And how that might overlook the importance of things like moral character and virtue.
And I can see how that could create some tension, right?
Yeah.
But it also feels kind of necessary. Like, if we're avoiding the tough questions, are we really getting to the heart of the matter?
That's a great point. And it's not just about critiquing secular views. Keller also acknowledges that Christians sometimes align too closely with certain political ideologies.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that happen.
Whether it's liberal or conservative, and they might need to challenge those frameworks as well.
It's like he's calling for a more nuanced and thoughtful approach all around.
Exactly. He's saying that the biblical vision of justice, it's too comprehensive to fit neatly into any one political ideology or economic system.
It requires us to actually engage with those who hold different views, both inside and outside the church.
And to bring the full breadth of that biblical perspective to the table.
It's a call to really think critically and engage deeply with these issues and to recognize that there are no easy answers or quick fixes.
Right. And this leads to one of Keller's most thought-provoking arguments. He says that true justice is, in a sense, always judgmental.
Wait, judgmental? Isn't justice supposed to be about fairness and impartiality?
It is. But Keller's point is that true justice isn't just about maximizing happiness or respecting individual rights without considering the bigger picture.
Okay, I'm following you.
It's about making judgments about what is good, right, and true. And those judgments, they're inevitably shaped by our deepest beliefs about the world and our place in it.
So it all goes back to those core values. We can't escape those fundamental questions about what actually constitutes a good life and a just society.
And that's why he says that pretending to have this neutral, secular conversation about justice, it actually prevents us from having those deeper, more meaningful conversations.
About the values and beliefs that actually matter.
Exactly. It's like we're afraid to touch the third rail, so we just keep dancing around the real issues instead of actually engaging with them.
Interesting.
So he's calling us to be more courageous, to step into those difficult conversations with humility, but also a willingness to, speak our truth.
It's a tall order, but it feels necessary if we really want to move beyond just the rhetoric and actually work towards a more just world.
Definitely. Now, to fully grasp Keller's approach to justice, we need to understand another key idea that kind of underpins his whole argument, and that's creation.
Okay, creation. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
How does creation tie into all of this?
So Keller contrasts the biblical creation account with the creation myths of other ancient cultures.
Okay.
And in a lot of those myths, the world emerges from this conflict and chaos. The gods are at war, and creation is this messy, violent process.
But the biblical creation story is different, right?
Right. It's about a God who speaks the world into being, a God of order and purpose.
Yeah. And there's that beautiful imagery of God as a craftsman, carefully creating the world, weaving together this tapestry of interconnected relationships.
Exactly. And it's within that created order that we find the concept of shalom,
which we talked about before.
Yeah. But remember, it's not just the absence of conflict. It's this state of wholeness, harmony, and flourishing. It's the way things were meant to be.
So justice, then, is about working to restore that original state of shalom, repairing the brokenness, and bringing things back into alignment with God's design.
Got it. Right. It's not about just fixing problems as they come up. It's about getting to the root of the issue and working towards a world that actually reflects that original harmony and wholeness, like from creation.
You're going back to the source.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to help us kind of visualize this, Keller uses this analogy of weaving a garment. So each individual life is like a thread. And all those threads are interwoven to create the fabric of society.
So if one thread is pulled loose or breaks, it weakens the whole garment.
Exactly. And if enough threads are damaged, the whole thing starts to unravel,
And that's where our responsibility comes in.
Right. We can't just stand by and watch as that fabric of shalom unravels. We have to weave ourselves into it.
We're part of the tapestry.
Exactly. We have to invest our time, our resources, our energy into strengthening those relationships, especially with those who are most vulnerable,
It makes me think about that story from Martha's Vineyard again, where the hearing community chose to learn sign language.
Oh.
So that the deaf members of their community could be fully included.
That's such a great example of what Keller's talking about. They saw a place where the fabric of shalom had been torn, and instead of ignoring it or trying to force the deaf community to conform, they chose to weave themselves in.
Yeah, to adapt and change so that everyone could thrive.
And it wasn't about charity or pity. It was about recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every member of their community.
Absolutely.
And what's amazing is that in doing so, they discovered all these unexpected benefits too, like learning sign language enriched the lives of the hearing community as well.
It really does highlight that justice isn't just about sacrifice. It's about creating a richer, more vibrant society for everyone.
And Keller's point is that when we actually embrace this vision of justice, we often find that it leads to a more fulfilling and meaningful life for ourselves, too.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness. You
Like
know,
isolated individuals.
exactly when one part of the community suffers, we all suffer.
And when one part flourishes, we all benefit.
Right. So, we've covered a lot of ground here, from Keller's personal journey to this really deep concept of shalom.
It's been quite the deep dive.
It has, but I think the question now is, where do we go from here?
Yeah, what does all of this mean for us listening right now?
Well, I think Keller's exploration of justice in Generous Justice challenges us to move beyond these simplistic slogans and easy answers.
It's a complex issue.
It is. He's inviting us to really grapple with the complexities of this idea. Examine our own assumptions and allow our faith to inform how we understand and pursue justice.
It's not a passive thing, it's a call to action.
Yes, absolutely. It's a call to humbly cooperate with others while respectfully challenging their limitations.
Finding that balance.
And to find practical ways to weave ourselves into the fabric of shalom in our own communities.
Yeah. Where do we see brokenness and how can we help to mend it?
Exactly. And it might feel overwhelming at times, but it's ultimately a hopeful vision.
I like that.
It reminds us that the pursuit of justice is actually a reflection of our deepest beliefs about the world.
Yeah, how we see ourselves and our responsibility to each other.
And it's a journey that we can take together one step at a time.
We've certainly taken some steps together today.
We have, and I think we've all come away with a new perspective on justice.
Yeah, no, I have. So as always, thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time as we explore another fascinating topic. Until then, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep seeking justice.